Hello there. I'll sometimes talk about the realities of creative freelancing and positioning, or the way people present themselves professionally. I gave a talk at ADC last November on this very topic, and following that, as well as some of my other videos, people will occasionally reach out to me asking for feedback or portfolio reviews. Essentially, thoughts on how to land better work or more of it. And so I thought, rather than circling around the topic endlessly in these private messages, it might be more productive to condense it into 5 recurring mistakes that I see freelancers making. Many are failing themselves, and in most cases they're doing so long before the quality of their work even enters the conversation at all. Here are 5 ways you might be making those mistakes, and what you might do about it. Now, firstly, we've got craft without direction. Every creative needs to assume 2 responsibilities. One of them is that of the creator, and the other is that of the manager. And it's the manager's role to ensure the creator is not left steering the ship alone. Your positioning is an operational responsibility, and so you need direction. And that isn't direction in some vague, fluffy sense either, because a set of ambitions floating around your head like cigarette smoke, that's not the same thing as direction. You've got to define a concrete objective, and then break that into smaller objectives, and from those you need to extrapolate actions that can be executed imminently, rather than eventually. There are throngs of creative freelancers who are failing, and that's because they're functionally rudderless. Now, to themselves, they're still figuring things out. And much of the failure lies in the conflation of motion and direction. You may be consuming the right tutorials, you might be adjusting what you think in your mind needs adjusting, but all the while you remain fundamentally unable to answer a very simple question. What exactly am I trying to build? It's the answer to that question that must determine all else that you undertake. Now on to number 2. An email for anyone is an email to no one. So as mentioned, a few months ago, I gave that talk about career positioning at ADC. And this is the last time I'll bring it up, I promise. But it was about the fact that your first few sentences are part of your value proposition, whether you realize that fact or not. After the talk, somebody approached me. They were enthusiastic and clearly engaged. They asked whether I would review their materials, to which I agreed, because why wouldn't I? The next day, I received an email that perfectly crystallized a pattern I've now witnessed repeatedly, particularly from people who are otherwise technically capable, and yet who are ultimately sabotaging themselves. This person was skilled and driven, yet, within the space of a few sentences over email, they'd managed to diminish my professional confidence in them rather substantially. When you've met someone in person, and especially when you haven't, if your email sounds scattershot, you're undermining your credibility. You've got to know who your recipient is, and equally as important, you've got to show that you know who they are. This person is evaluating signals of attention and intentionality. They're ultimately trying to determine whether you are thoughtful and capable of context. Most outreach can be improved rather dramatically as follows. Always ensure you are answering 3 very simple questions. Why them? Why now? Why you? Why are you contacting this specific person instead of 20 interchangeable strangers? Why does this outreach make sense now, in this moment, rather than as a random act of professional desperation? And finally, why you? Why should this person meaningfully care that you specifically are the one reaching out? And do keep something else in mind here. Even excellent outreach is ignored more often than it is answered. That's simply the nature of it. So please don't interpret silence as evidence that you're untalented or not worthy or doomed. Send through thoughtful, relevant emails, then send more of them, then send even more of them. On to number 3, the dopamine hit of curation. Too many people consume advice passively rather than metabolizing it operationally. They've developed a kind of spectator relationship with their own development. They'll bookmark the tabs, they'll order the right books and save the right videos, but all of those acts are intellectual masturbation if you then proceed to conduct yourself the same way you did last week. We've got access to extraordinary amounts of information these days. There's entire careers worth of insight sitting online permanently, often for free. And yet, most people waste it by nodding along, feeling briefly inspired, and then changing absolutely nothing about the way they conduct themselves professionally. I would strongly advise against confusing self-recognition with progress. Feeling seen for a moment is not the same thing as implementing positive change. Riding the brief dopamine hit that comes from hearing someone articulate a problem that you already knew you had is not the same as forward motion. At a certain point, information ceases to be the bottleneck, and your own inaction becomes the bottleneck. But I presume you knew that already. On to number 4, the quality trap. The quality of your craft matters tremendously, but it's the baseline. I can open YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, or ArtStation right now and find people more technically proficient than either one of us, and it would take me mere moments. The truth, however, is that many of them will still disappear into obscurity because everything surrounding their abilities feels utterly anonymous. There's this sense of absenteeism in their work, in that half of the professional presentation is left entirely unattended. We've entered an era where competent output is astonishingly abundant. The internet is now flooded with people capable of producing something passable at the very least. That means that technical proficiency alone no longer creates distinction in the way people wished it did. Many creatives will spend years optimizing execution within their craft, and then they'll neglect their positioning. It's almost as though they're endlessly refining the recipes whilst giving no one a reason to come and dine. The belief is that the work should speak entirely for itself. And sure, the work may be solid, but as solid as it is, everything surrounding it feels vacant, so no lasting impression forms. And now that I've pointed this out, you'll likely notice it constantly if you start paying attention to it. Websites with no unique angle whatsoever. Reels with captivating titles such as Music Reel 2025. And again, emails that read like a pamphlet fisted through your letterbox. The reality is that the work is never assessed in isolation. It's an amalgamation of everything. Your judgment, your aptitude for curation, how you frame it. Before anyone decides whether your work is good or not, they're already absorbing signals as to whether you seem thoughtful or coherent. Those surrounding signals carry far more weight than they once did, disproportionately so. If you present the same as everyone else, you're biasing the recipient preemptively into thinking you are the same as everyone else. I would invite you to dedicate at least 20% of your time on your presentation. Learn to recognize when you're tweaking something within the work that is for your benefit instead of the audience's benefit. Then take that extra time and use it strategically. Last one, number 5, an artist above all. There's this belief that too much attention paid to presentation somehow undermines artistic integrity, as though framing one's work properly sits beneath the dignity of a true artist. Meanwhile, these same people will spend an inordinate amount of time on minutiae within their craft. But when the moment comes to present themselves professionally, suddenly everything collapses into sterile language. Biographies so sanitized that they inevitably all blur together. And therein lies the issue. These are often people with taste. They understand intrinsically that presentation alters perception in every other area, but then somehow they overlook the fact that the same principle applies in every area of the work, especially when considering how another human being encounters their professional presence. This happens constantly. Work sent out into the world with no consideration for atmosphere or context. What follows, inevitably, is silence, which is then taken as proof that the industry is unfair, saturated, or impossible to penetrate. Now, let's acknowledge the fact that it is certainly unfair. It is saturated. But often the issue is far more fundamental than that, and we're stumbling on our way to the first hurdle. People are attempting to build careers whilst leaving huge portions of their professional identity completely neglected. Whether creatives like hearing this fact or not, the way somebody experiences you professionally becomes inseparable from the product itself after a certain point. Your judgment becomes part of the offer. Your taste equally becomes part of the offer. And so yes, your communication becomes part of the offer. Now, if all of those surrounding signals feel vague or interchangeable, people start to assume the work itself probably is too. Now, I know branding sounds like something for guys sipping matcha out of Stanley cups, but if you're a freelancer, you're a business, so it's time to behave like it. Conclusion, the self-audit. Let's make this very simple. Go to your website, write down 10 things you think need improving. I assure you, by the time you're jotting down number 3, the person that you were hoping to impress has already closed the tab and gone back to Instagram. Make the list, fix the issues. Do that for all of your public-facing assets. Next, I'd like you to take the last outreach email you sent and read it again carefully. Now imagine receiving 10 slight variations of it every day for the next 3 years. Ask yourself honestly whether there's anything within that email that signals an actual person with taste, intent, or self-awareness. Or does it simply read like another creative requesting access to opportunity by proximity? Finally, you know that thing that you keep delaying, even though you're acutely aware that you should be doing it? Do it. Get rid of avoidance disguised as preparation, your illusions of perfectionism. Whilst you're waiting for the right moment, the people actually moving forward are often not the most talented people in the room. These are the same people who realize that, in this world, presentation matters just as much as produce. But by all means, wait until you're ready. Just realize that moment rarely comes. Stay sharp. I'll see you next time.